This episode of Ludonarrative Dissidents is brought to you by Scribblykins, who wants to shout out Role-Playing Public Radio. This lovely little role-playing podcast called RPPR is great. It consists of a bunch of great guys and gals playing and occasionally making role-playing games and having a fun time of it. There's a main podcast that goes into various role-playing games, experiences, happenings, news, game design, discussions, whatever catches podcast creators Ross Payton's and his associates' fancies. But the real meat is in the wealth of actual plays. I have fond memories of episodes such as Shipping the Devil and actual play classics like U-Boat Heraus, Lover in the Ice, and They Served Brandolin Red. They've run some really great stories over the years, and it's all accessible and free. And if you sponsor them on Patreon with at least $10, you can participate in online games or even get game design feedback on your games from Ross Payton and as well. What's not to like? Thank you so much, Scribblykins, and thank you for supporting the Kickstarter. Enjoy this episode. Welcome to Ludonarrative Dissidents, a podcast about role-playing games, their culture, design, and play. Each episode deep dives into one tabletop RPG book, mechanic, or style of game, taking it apart to see how it works and putting it back together to understand how people play it. I'm Ross Payton, joined by Greg Stolze and James Wallace. We've all written for RPGs, published our own games, and have worked in the field for years. You can learn more about us at ludonarrativedissidents.com. Hello, and welcome to Ludonarrative Dissidents. This is Season 3, Episode 13, Rifts Ultimate Edition. As part of our Kickstarter, me, Greg Stolze, and James Wallace each got to pick a role-playing game, and for my single choice, this was not voted on by anyone except for me. This is my own personal indulgence. I chose Palladium's Crown Jewel Rifts because I think it's interesting to talk about. There are certainly merits to it. My overall thoughts on Rifts are many. I am personally attached to it. It was one of the first role-playing games I was ever exposed to. The first RPG I ever played was another Palladium game, Teenage Mutant Ninjas and Other Strangeness. And from there, I was exposed to Rifts early on. And it was one of the top-selling brands of RPGs for a long time. Before Third Ed, D&D dominated the market. Back in the 90s and early 2000s, it was like Rifts, World of Darkness / Vampire, and D&D, and like those three shared the top sales. Yeah, Rifts is everything the Palladium game line has ever, and the Palladium as a company has ever. Yeah, it all led up to Rifts, and that has been their business model since then. If you're not familiar with Palladium, their business strategy or their game design strategy, God, there's so much to talk about.
Can I give, because we may have listeners who are unfamiliar with Rifts. They could be young for all we know. Mm-hmm. So the deal with Rifts is that it is a kitchen sink setting. The idea is, okay, so it's set in the future, so it's a science fiction game. But there was this big war and disaster, so it's a post-apocalyptic game. But part of the disaster was that Earth's ley lines were filled with mystic power and ripped open, causing portals, the titular rifts, to all these other worlds, and temporary rifts open all the time, and stuff just comes out. So anything, you want to play as a transformer, you probably can. Mm-hmm. If you want to play as a wizard, sure. Ninja, sure. Creepy kid who grew up in the ruins, sure. Baby dragon, we got you. It was a GURPS-like attempt to make a single system to which anything could be appended. But even more than GURPS, GURPS, the idea was generic universal role-playing. We're going to have one set of rules that can handle, we're going to do a gritty game about astronauts doing secret missions in space in the 1980s and, the terrible truth behind the Challenger accident. And also, same rules can handle, we're all Rusalkas from mythic Russia. And the same rules can handle, we're time travelers or dimension hoppers or investigators of horrible mysteries. So GURPS would change gears and emulate genre, would change the rules to emulate genre, like Meryl Streep getting into a new role. Rifts was like, no, everything is happening in the same place at the same time. It's chaos.
It's all in the same background. It's all in the same world. Whatever you want. And the mechanical stuff being identical is almost kind of an afterthought, because the Palladium system had always kind of been there, from Palladium Fantasy, which was kind of Kevin Siembieda's D&D homebrew, through the stuff that other people had developed, like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and other Strangeness RPG, onto Rifts. They're all fundamentally based on the same set of mechanics, to the extent that the book I wrote for Rifts, or co-wrote with Kevin Siembieda, Mutants in Orbit, was actually a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles After the Bomb book, co-statted with Rifts. And with editorial interruptions by Kevin to make it more Rifts-like, because it turned out I did not have the proper vibe. I will say at this point that my contract with Palladium is still binding and contains a disparagement clause. I am not allowed to say bad things about Palladium, or they are allowed to sue me. And if anyone knows Kevin Siembieda's litigious track record, which is a matter of public record, I don't want to go there.
That's not a negative comment. That's just a fact.
Yeah, exactly. I may be circumspect in some of my comments unless I can back them up with actual truth. Yeah, there's a lot of things I would like to say about working with Palladium, and what an interesting experience that was. I did actually, for an early experience in the role-playing industry, I have been screwed over in worse ways by worse editors than Kevin Siembieda. I've already probably said too much.
You danced right up to the line,
Yeah.
but I hope you're still good, buddy.
I would say, for people who are curious about this, you can look up someone who used to work with Kevin and work for Palladium, Bill Coffin, posted a lot on rpg.net about his experiences working for the company and what it was like to work at the Palladium offices in Michigan. And so those are pretty fascinating documents.
Can you give us a brief version? When I mentioned to Caleb Stokes that I was going to be... When I mentioned to Caleb Stokes that you were making me read Rifts in between, his spontaneous observations about your obsession with this property, he mentioned these RPG.net, apparently the Coffin Files or whatever. So yeah, I didn't read them. What's in there?
It talks a lot about Kevin's editorial process, meaning that I do remember some highlights include one of his strengths as an editor, as a game company owner or manager, is scouting art talent. The Rift's artwork and the Palladium artwork in general, they land a lot of really great artists.
Oh yeah, the number of people who have had their first breaks. Yeah. Larry McDougall is a name that comes to mind because he's in the Ultimate Rifts book. He did my first Palladium book, Mutants in Avalon. Some lovely work. And, Larry McDougall, these is just gorgeous, gorgeous stuff. But with Rifts in particular, Kevin Long. And Kevin's another one who worked incredibly closely and was almost synonymous with Palladium until very suddenly in the late 90s he wasn't. And is now over at Raven Software working on Call of Duty, where I think he's one of the lead artists, or, senior, because he's been there 28 years. And, the very best of him. He is a lovely man.
I was unaware that it was possible to work in computer games for 20 years at the same company. I didn't know that was a thing that happened. The impression
in Japan, that's actually Nintendo is very good about that. So that's the reason why the Zelda games are so good, is they keep the same people and they have institutional knowledge.
What?
Yeah, weird.
You mean there are drawbacks to just firing your staff and starting over every 6 or 8 years?
Yeah, we should talk to Dennis Detwiller about that.
I've listened to Dennis Detwiller about that.
I feel we're... Gentlemen, I feel we are digressing.
We are digressing. So my point was that Kevin would get this great artwork, but he was very mercenary in that he would just get whatever the artist made, and then he'd get a picture of some weird creature, and then he would just make up a backstory and slap it into whatever book he was working on to pad the page count. Let
he who has never done that, who's never sinned, cast the first stone. I've done that, with my very first professional job. We realized we miscounted the number of cards that were going into Sphere Walker, and they're like, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're at Gen Con. We're just going to go from table to table to table. You see a piece of art you like, we'll apply a WotC budget to it, get a license, write a story about it. And, some cool stuff came out of that. great creativity can arise from constraint and attention and a sense of urgency. When you're stuck, you don't always fall back on your comfortable tropes.
Well, slightly more problematic would be, as Bill Coffin describes it, is he would often get new writers, and they would write a treatment for a book or a project or something like that. And Kevin's like, well, that's not quite what I want. And then he would rewrite it substantially without permission and then attach himself as a co-author.
Yes.
And
it is clear in the contract that he can do this. He gives himself permission, and he is Palladium, he is Rifts. It is his vision. He says what goes.
Yeah.
What I don't know if I should say this, I'm bloody going to, is that Palladium pays its creators, well, its writers in particular, I don't know about the artists, a royalty based on the profit of a book once it gets into profit. But it's it's a decent percentage. But if Kevin comes onto your book and rewrites a chunk of it, then suddenly your percentage goes way down and Kevin's percentage goes way up.
Mm-hmm. This is this sounds like movie bookkeeping where they're like, actually, Die Hard never did turn a profit.
It's not quite like that. I got a bunch of decent checks off my Palladium books.
All right.
They were straight dealers. My experience, up to a certain point where I don't know. It seems to happen with a number of Palladium creatives that either they get to a certain point or they have a massive falling out with Kevin. And there was, I believe, in the early 2000s, it became clear that a long-time employee had basically been embezzling from the company. Ooh. I believe millions of dollars, and they very nearly went under.
That's really impressive that there was that much to steal, honestly.
Kevin does say right toward the end of the Ultimate Rifts rulebook that millions of people have played Rifts. I don't know where he gets that figure from, but I guess it's based on some kind of sales. Rifts was really successful, and you have to remember, Palladium Fantasy came out mid-80s. Palladium is a footnote in the industry because up to that point, all role-playing games were either boxed sets or hardbacks, or small press. And Palladium Fantasy came out as a softcover 8.5 by 11 book, and retailers were up in arms going, do you not know that God himself has decreed the two true forms of role-playing games? And then it sold like hotcakes, and they shut up. And the softcover 8.5 by 11 book became the industry standard for a long time.
Was it cheaper because it wasn't a hardback?
I believe it was, yeah. And Palladium's prices have always been on the low end.
I think he has his own presses, yeah.
They've always, compared to the industry average for a book of, say, 96 pages, Palladium have always been $1 or $2 or $3 or $4 these days cheaper. And I think that's made a difference. The Ultimate
and if it's
Rift,
got Kevin Long art on the cover, and you're like, well, I could get this thing with worse art that costs more, but it's a hardback. Well, but man, look at the chrome on this. Look, they did the light on that chrome looks so much like light on chrome.
Yeah, I mean the original Rift cover is Keith Parkinson, I believe, and is gorgeous. Mutants in Orbit has a Keith Parkinson cover. Tick box, career goal achieved. I got a Keith Parkinson. Kevin's contacts with artists in the industry were fantastic, and the books looked. On the outside, looked absolutely fantastic. The front covers were stunning.
I wish I knew how he did that. I am constantly trying to hire artists, trying to be fair, trying to treat them like human beings instead of fungible content mills, and yet I get ghosted, and I don't know what's going on. These are not people I've met face to face where my charisma dump stat can affect them in any way, or any odious personal habits I'm unaware of. I don't get it.
A couple things. I'm pretty sure Palladium used to, and may still have its own printing presses.
I can speak categorically on this. They use McNaughton and Gunn in Ypsilanti in Michigan, who are actually
a local one.
Thanked in the book, because we used McNaughton and Gunn as well, because Palladium had used them and Palladium recommended them very highly. McNaughton and Gunn, the quality of the books was excellent, but the competence of the printer themselves was among the lowest that I've ever worked with. And I have enough material on shit McNaughton and Gunn pulled that would fill an entire other podcast. But Palladium were enormously loyal to them, and because Palladium pushed a huge amount of business their way, they were very loyal to Palladium and did not screw up Palladium's books, as opposed to, smaller companies based 4,000 miles away, where they would not ship our stuff or bind the maps into the wrong book, or what are the other ones? Oh, accidentally put a rulebook in hardback when we'd asked for soft cover and charge us for it. All kinds of stuff.
Ay.
Yeah.
Okay.
What they did have, and I think, and I think finally we might actually get to talking about the book itself. I believe that in the late 80s, Kevin bought a linotype photo typesetting system. Rather than going desktop publishing, as almost everyone else was, he went old school, possibly. I don't know why. But this is why all Palladium books have that very, very distinctive 2-column, very sparse layout. Because for a long time, long into the 90s, they were being laid out on this photo typesetting machine, pasted up by hand. And then they've just emulated that same layout using digital software these days. It is a very distinctive look. It's very sparse. It does allow them to pack a lot of words into the book, but it does mean that they all look almost identical, and they look like something from the late 80s.
Yeah, I'm gonna say, I mentioned, Ross, that your selection was 382 pages, right? Did I mention for our listeners at home? So it's not, but it's not just a 382 page book. It's 382 pages of teeny weeny Ice Drano vision.
Yep. 2 columns, Times New Roman. Yeah.
It is Times New Roman. It's readable. It's very readable. The letter spacing is good. The leading is good. The gutters are decent. It's a very readable layout. It's just, by the standards of the role-playing industry, bland. It's kind of, if you're, tutorial 101 in, generic DTP software is put together a layout that looks exactly like it. 3 header styles. Actually, 4, they use 4 header styles. But they're just the same font in bold. That's all it is. And there's no sidebars, and there are no box outs. It's just 2-column text the whole way through.
A Palladium book from 1995 looks the same as a book from, 2015. Like, they all look the same. What Palladium figured out, what Kevin Siembieda figured out is, he figured out what his market wanted, and they want more stuff. And he figured out a formula to deliver that stuff. And he's been just delivering more stuff. And by stuff, I mean the things that gamers want. 1, they want lore. They want lots of backstory. And 2, they want cool stuff, 3, they want stats. They want stat blocks. And boy, do they. And for items, for spells, for robots, for monsters. And they want it in a format that they can learn one system, and then they never have to learn a system again. Because if you learn the Palladium system, which is, it's like, that the Blues Brother, you remember the movie where the bar says, oh yeah, we got both kinds of music, country and western. It's like, hey, oh wait, what kind of rules do you have for player? Oh, we got both kinds, percentile and D20. It's the exact, they have.
What kind of damage you got? Oh, we got both times standard and mega damage.
Yeah, and mega damage, yeah. And once you learn the Palladium system, you can read every book and you understand what's going on, and you can just flip through it and get the stuff that you want, and you can keep going. And this is also, again, like gaming as a solitary activity, like a reading thing, like this is the Palladium
the closet drama aspect. My take was, as I read Rifts, I'm like, this is like a buffet, and not like a big, have you ever gone to a really, really big Midwestern buffet where, you think you've seen everything, and then there's another room with more steam tables, and you're like, oh, wow, there's just a whole nother 20-foot long burger station in there, and, and there's a pizza table. Holy cow. And so I'm like, there's very little, I found very little in this that was great, but there is a lot of it. And some of it...
Literally what you were saying, the first third of the book, third of the book is character classes, OCCs, as Rift's termed. And you're thinking, wow, that's a lot. And the first one, the very first one, the
Cyborg Commando, yeah, I think.
The Cyborg Commando is like 8 pages. And it's all the skills and all the gear and all the augmentations for the gear for the different skills. And it's so complete. And you're thinking, wow. And then there's, a third of the book. And you think, wow, now maybe we get on to the actual stuff itself. Then you hit the Coalition. 5 more OCCs. And it's just, it keeps coming. More stuff, more stuff, more stuff.
I feel like the buffet comparison can go deeper because, when some of it's underdone, some of it's overdone, some of it has been under the heat lamp for way too long and you're sick of it. But this is something that is absolutely stunning if you have the appetite of an adolescent. When I was going through my growth spurts, I'm like, oh yeah, let's go to the buffet, the one that has the chocolate cream pies with like the chocolate shavings on top. That's good stuff. And, now that I'm older and have been diagnosed with fatty liver, I'm much less likely to indulge in that sort of gustatory excess.
As someone who was an adolescent who was exposed to Rifts, it was very fun to read through this book because it gives you so many, like you said, none of them are like exceptional or great, but like there's so many different ideas in it that there's something that's going to draw someone's attention. Like there are some interesting character concepts in the Rifts lineup. Cyborg, okay, that's been done a million times, but they have other types of enhanced sci-fi soldiers. Like I think the Juicer and the Crazy are pretty, yeah.
I read Crazies and I'm like, oh, cool, Rifts fishmolks.
Yeah, exactly. We, mind over matter and changing the brain so they think the person is stronger, so they develop psychic powers, and they're also, mentally unstable, and that's a Crazy. And then the Juicer, anti-drug propaganda, but as a character class.
Yes, your heart may explode by the time you reach 20.
Yeah, exactly. And as a teenager, like, oh, that's so cool. You live 4 years and like you'll be unkillable because you get auto dodge, which is a ridiculously powerful ability, and you can't be hit, and you're super cool, and then you die after 4 years. I'm like, oh, that's awesome. And then of course the iconic Glitter Boy, which is what if your robot had the biggest gun?
Yes, an 8-foot rail gun.
I'm just trying to figure out how many different kinds of mech pilot you can be. There's at least 3.
Yeah. And this is just the core book.
The other thing to remember, I'm just going to nip back to a moment to the Combat Cyborg, which struck me as a really interesting way to kick off essentially the rulesy stuff, because it's prefaced by about 40 pages of background and setup and geography, which is initially interesting and then incredibly dull for about 30 pages. It just runs through the world, country by country, and kind of what's going on there. And it's like, you've got no context for this. What am I doing with it? Anyway, but then you finally hit the Combat Cyborg. And I just went, oh, not the Cyborg Commando, which was, for those who don't know it, Cyborg Commando was the game Gary Gygax did after he left TSR. And it was supposed to be a big deal, and he had other star designers working on it, and it was an absolute disaster. It flopped. But it wasn't bad. It was over-complex, but it's very focused. You have to be a Cyborg Commando character rather than D&D, where you can be, whatever you want, as long as you can fling damage at the other guy. Rifts is not a million miles away from that. Struck me as an interesting start. But this was, Cyborg Commando was only 1985. Rifts is 1990. There was, when Rifts came out, there was no other game like it. Very shortly afterwards, I mean, literally within weeks, there was, because Torg also came out in 1990, which was West End's multi-planar aliens. Weird shit has happened to the Earth, and there are now dimensional vortexes and openings to other universes.
And Torg always I never really played either. I maybe generated a character for a Rifts game that never got off the ground. But I remember looking through somebody's copy of Torg when I was still in high school, and it just and it made an impression. And I'm like, oh, so there are these different places you can go, and they have different vibes. And it seemed to me, y'all can correct me, but that Torg had more respect from players in general and industry professionals than Rifts did. That Torg was the thinking man's Rifts.
Yeah, Torg was, its background was more developed. You had backgrounds like background worlds where you could adventure like the cyber papacy, or a world that was based on kind of the Conan Doyle, Edgar Rice Burroughs Lost World stuff. And it was cool, but it was quite knowing. There was a degree of thinkiness to it. It wasn't just about chucking damage at the other guy. And Chrome, the mechanics were, it was Greg Gordon, and I think the mechanics bore a similarity to some work he'd done previously. I want to say on DC Heroes, but I haven't researched that, I haven't checked that, so I may well be wrong. But there's an elegant mechanic there, and it came out of West End. West End slightly past their glory. This was their big release a few years after the Star Wars role-playing game. They were a major company at the time. And Torg kind of flew, and it survived for about 4 or 5 years and did pretty well, but just went away. Whereas Kevin was just flinging out supplements for Rifts with fantastic covers on them, each of them basically going, look, this guy's got a bigger gun! And it sold like hotcakes. Torg was pitched more older.
Why, at that time, what were the economic okay, we'll see if the fans dig this part. What were the economic factors behind the supplement of the month mill? Because that's what I remember from the 90s, and that's what I was doing in the 2000s. And that seemed to be the key to having your company be around for more than 4 or 5 years is, okay, you put out your main game, and then you have a supplement. People will not play games that do not give them new stuff at least, every 2 months. So many companies tried to do that and buried themselves. So, and that's no longer, unless you're D&D, that's no longer the way to do it, right?
Yeah, they don't put out that much. Like
nobody's trying that anymore. So I don't know what changed, what happened. I mean, obviously, one thing that changed is that you can just go online and get an endless fire hose of fan created material of various qualities, which is only going to triple in pressure when fools start applying AI to it, which I'm sure they're already doing. So, you will get not just, there'll be the professionally released stuff, the pirated professionally released stuff, the good fan stuff, and then the remaining 80% of everything that'll turn up in search is just AI swill.
Sturgeon's law has never applied harder.
One thing in the early 2000s, you had the D20 shovelware era, but I think what's changed now is the crowdfunding. Like now, mid-sized company. Let's look at something successful in indie, say Mothership. Mothership, I think they have a thriving third-party scene, and then what they do as a company is focus on big releases like box sets. And I think they just put out a big Kickstarter that raised over $1 million for a bounty hunting supplement. They do nice the indie RPG as bespoke artistic art object, I think, does well. So doing one new project a year, and then but also having very small, cheap things to do the supplement to get people to play. As we said before, adventure scenarios are marketing for your game, and Rifts, they don't publish many. Palladium doesn't publish many adventures. Almost all their books are
how would you?
Well, no, what they do is source books for about geographic areas and new dimensions and monsters and things. They add more stuff. They don't have adventures per se.
And aspects. It was psionics and magic and all of it.
More powers.
I'm just going to chip in on the economics thing. I think it's if you find you've got a hit game, you don't know how long it's going to be a hit for. And the temptation is just to see how far you can and fast you can ride that and what the market will bear. And Palladium found pretty fast that it would bear quite a lot of Rifts material. You have to remember they were putting out maybe a Palladium fantasy book a year at this point. And up to that point, Palladium fantasy... Actually, no, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles had been a huge seller for them. But by the end of the 90s, by the end of the 80s, that bubble had burst because the TV series had come out. It was now a kid phenomenon. It was a kid game. No self-respecting role player would be seen playing Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Other Strangeness. So as the role-playing sales were dying away really fast.
Huh. Okay.
And at that point, Rifts conveniently hits. But the game, they'd never churned out stuff for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. They'd done a decent number of supplements for it. But Rifts hit big. And I think Kevin was just, let's ramp up. Let's see how much the market will bear. Oh, wow. Okay, let's gallop this pony. And, and frankly, why not? If the market's buying, you're a fool not to sell.
Yeah.
Well, also, the Rift system, all their games are compatible with each other. And they publish another licensed game, Robotech, a superhero game called Heroes Unlimited, a modern horror game called Beyond the Supernatural.
Ninjas and Super Spies.
Espionage, James Bond kind of game. A couple of horror games, Nightbang.
Yeah, a bunch of them.
But they all, in fact, there's a series of books for Rifts called the Rifts Conversion books, which are like how to convert stuff from one Palladium game into Rifts, because like they were doing this Portal stuff way before Rick and Morty, and like, oh yeah, your character from your superhero can pop into Rifts, and now they're in a mega damaged creature, and they can punch robots and fight monsters. Again, it's the stuff of the week, stuff of the month, and they always had catchy covers and just enough ideas to keep people interested.
Well,
in it. Because,
and I'll be fair here that every now and then, and at one point back when there were gaming magazines, I was a reviewer and I would read the Palladium stuff and I'd be like, okay, sure. Wow, there's a really nifty idea. Okay, and now there's 5 more pages of guns, and okay. Oh, that's a really interesting detail. And, reading this, I'm hitting, page 206, the Armor Bazaar spell. And I'm like, in most games, this is the shtick of an entire character class. But here it's just, one spell among dozens. So, and, you get to the woo factor, and it just, mentions dragon apes in passing and zenith moon warpers. And I'm like, okay, give me my woo, please. I would like a large glass of woo on ice. Thank you. Thank you, Kevin. And then you get page 53 and you're just like, oh my God, that's a lot of cyber eyes. How, you can't have more than 2. Why do we need all these options? Why can't we just have, I don't know. It's very, very grainy. If you have played a game where you're like, I don't feel like 3 columns of skills on my character sheet in small print, that seems like too much. This is grainier than that.
I mean, there's also Palladium is notorious for copying and pasting stuff from their previous rules, like skill descriptions, like the fact that, characters like have and cybernetic upgrades and things like that. They'll just maybe touch a word or 2 up. And so again, like, how in low budget movies, they'll have padding, right? Like they'll have like characters parking their car and walking inside or just getting from point A to point B. And like you have like,
or some stock footage.
Stock Defense Department footage,
yeah, stock footage. And so like the Palladium has mastered this and be like, yeah, we're gonna have 20 pages of skills. Like, you don't really need all this horsemanship skills but we did that for our cowboy riff supplement, the Far West, and so we're gonna copy it back in the Ultimate Core book because it'll add a couple pages, and we're gonna add
which is a lot less obnoxious, I will admit. If I saw a bunch of copied and pasted stuff in a 64-page book, I would be, I would feel more robbed than seeing copy and pasted stuff in a tiny print 380-page book. But still, having published stuff, there is that, it's like there is no perfect way to square the circle between, okay, we put this in another book, but it seems very relevant here and is important to running this type of game, so we're going to have to regurgitate. And some people who already have that book are going to hate it. But if we make those people happy by leaving it out, the people who don't have that book are going to be like, why aren't there these rules that I need? Why are you forcing me to buy this other book I didn't want? And then they're mad. And you cannot, I guess what I'm saying is you cannot make gamers happy ever under any circumstance.
So don't even try.
Maybe I went too far there, but it would be great if there was a universal solution to that. And one of the things I've tried is with, okay, once you pay for X, it's free forever for everybody. And so, you could, if that had really broken wide, it'd be like, okay, go online. And if you want to see this, well, hey, look, here's all this other stuff that the fans who are waiting to welcome you paid for in advance for you to see now. But I probably was not a sufficient businessman to make that function.
Rifts is much more on the model of you've paid for this once, you'll probably pay for it again. And it's not to the extent that, they'll redo a book and it'll be mostly the same material, but with some but the reuse of material that Ross talks about is egregious or used to be more egregious, I think, than it is now. There are elements in this book, Rifts Ultimate, which I'm pretty sure are just literally, they are the same tables taken out of the core Rifts book from 1990. Large chunks of that. What Kevin has done to this is he's put in some more background stuff. Lots of the Erin Tarr, who is the in-game character who she's been everywhere and she's written books about it, and it's completely unclear who is publishing these books or how they're getting sold or who's buying them. But she's writing books about all of this stuff. Oh, and the establishment don't like her. So she's there's that stuff, but there's also lots of designer's notes. Just plonked in the middle of the text because this is a Palladium layout. There's no box outs or anything like that, or putting them on a separate page, in which Kevin explains some of the design decisions he's made. I mean, okay, he's, slaving away in the outskirts of Detroit with very little respect from the rest of the industry. And there is an extent to which to which Palladium is like kind of a mini Games Workshop. They're almost separate to the rest of the RPG industry. They do their own thing. They have their market, and they understand it, and they sell to it. And there's not a lot of cross-pollination between that and people who play other games, particularly the sort of games that we typically talk about on Ludonarrative Dissidents.
Is there a person out there who plays 40K and Rifts, and that's it?
Could well
Probably.
be. If you look at the glitter points, there are similarities between just the look. I'm not in any way alleging any kind of plagiarism, but the vibe you get off a Glitter Boy is the same vibe you get off a Space Marine. Massive, strong armor. There's a human. You can barely be aware that there's a human being inside. There's someone with enormous potency and a massive gun. It's the same vibe. Warhammer 40K was only 3 years, but was 1987. It's 3 years before Rift. So yeah, there was something in the air, I think, that was ready for games like this, power fantasies like this. And I think a lot of people disparage role-playing games by saying they're power fantasies. Rifts is a power fantasy, and it just wears that on its chrome-plated sleeve and loves it, and is absolutely... You can be anything you want as long as it allows you to do enormous quantities of mega damage. Mega damage, the game term, is literally damage times, I believe, 1,000.
100.
It's
100.
Mega damage. It's 100. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which is not what mega means.
And that's not a bad idea. I mean, the best thing I did for Delta Green, the role-playing game, probably is the idea of, okay, so instead of this old Call of Cthulhu approach of, oh, well, you've unlocked the tank gun, so roll 17d6 for your damage. I'm like, what if we just gave it a percentage that is, this is this extremely powerful attack's percentage chance to just obliterate any human being. If you roll a success, boom, they're gone. Farewell. Flights of angels sing thee to whatever. And it worked. It cut down handling time. And I can see why, mega damage is... And it's like, okay, yeah, if you've got a mega damage weapon and you're up against someone who doesn't have mega damage stuff, yeah, hit once and clean your shoes.
And that actually comes from another prior Palladium game, and I'm not sure if it's the Mechanoids or the Robotech or Macross game, but which also involves giant robots fighting people. But yeah, it's one of the few sort of innovative things. Is anti-tank weapons are disproportionately powerful, and when you use them on squishy human creatures, it's very bad. It's very decisive. But although in the original Rifts book, I actually remember the original Rifts books, they don't even have. There's this little section in the rules in the Ultimate Rifts book talking about, if you're an SDC, a normal person, and you get hit by a mega damage weapon, here's some things you can do to say you're just not instantly dead. Maybe you just lose an arm and you need a cybernetic limb to be replaced or something like that. They have puny little laser pistols that just shoot out a thin little beam and they do mega damage. But if you get shot with a pencil thin beam in your arm, does that mean you're instantly dead, or is just that part of your body as a whole? And to explain a little more about the mechanics, as I mentioned, Rifts comes from the Palladium Fantasy system, which was a mid-'80s hack of AD&D, essentially. It's percentiles for skills and D20 for combat, but basically you roll a D20 to attack and add your strike bonus to hit, and then the defender can choose to dodge, parry, or roll with impact or entangle. In certain circumstances, it's a roll-off. Whoever wins succeeds. All characters have a certain number of attacks per round. Using them on defensive things, actions would use up your action, so you could be dodging the entire round and not have a chance to hit back. Unless you're a juicer, in which case you automatically dodge with your auto-dodge ability, and so you can automatically dodge all attacks. And that's it. It's in practice, I can tell you from playing it, it's very clunky in combat, because you'll be looking at stacking so many bonuses, especially if you're a powerful character. And this game is about min-maxing. Let's not get anything wrong. It's about character optimization. Yeah,
this has never been streamlined. This is it's the antithesis of streamlined. It's add more stuff.
I'll tell you what got me. I will tell you gentlemen, exactly what got me was around page 288. I'm like, wait. So if you're a human being who has attained physical strength 31, that's different from a robot that has physical strength 31, which is different from a supernatural being. And I'm like, they're all physical strength. Wow. If they're different, why are we even putting numbers on things? Why?
Because
the only thing that's good about giving a numerical score to a thing is that the number is always the number of the thing.
Let me explain about the Palladium system, because I recognize this, having actually had to design stuff for this.
you were in the belly of the beast, man.
But I recognized it from 10 years earlier when I was introduced to role-playing games and playing AD&D and reading Dungeon Master's, trying to learn it from the Dungeon Master's Guide, which is not the way to learn, because without the Player's Handbook, it's kind of difficult. Palladium is not a system you learn; it is a system you wrestle, and you subdue it. Finally, you subdue it, and you feel the success. You feel, I understand this. I have got these two parallel different types of strength, to use your thing, in my head. I understand how regular damage interfaces with mega damage. I understand the flowchart that makes character generation work. And because I remember the thing that took time in the supplement was generating NPCs, because there was a loop within character generation at one point. So A would affect B, B would affect C, C would then affect A. And it's like, okay, do you just go round that triangle, keeping the numbers going
up? Rinse, repeat. I do not see a step that says stop.
The sense of accomplishment of internalizing these rules and having this system in your head as a teenage gamer who, may not have succeeded at many other things in their life, and Jesus, I hadn't at this point, is enormous. You are the master of rifts. You are the master of all this chrome, all these battle suits, all these gigantic guns and amazing cyborg eyes and stuff, and you have mastered it. And that is why Rifts is a success. Because it is a game that you master. It is not a game that you learn to play and play for a few evenings and then move on to Vampire or whatever. You master Rifts. You make it your bitch and then you play the hell out of it.
Exactly.
Is this...
This is not canonical.
Yeah.
Is this what gave you Riftsitis? Is this the way that it... Is this the reason that it obsesses?
I think it's contractually obligated not to talk about that part. I want to say Rifts is also like, if you're a game designer and you're worried about balancing your game, just look at Rifts and just know that like Rifts actively is hostile to the idea of game balance. Okay. It is because
Where's the quote?
Yeah. Rifts is a thinking man's game, by the way. That's a quote in the book somewhere in the GM section, and something I have told Caleb many times, and he never believes me. Yeah,
the section on are the CS good guys or bad guys? I'm like, no, this feels legit. This is meaningful.
Let me talk about the character classes, because like the Rifts will give you all these options for character classes, and you can be a newborn dragon who is the equivalent of an armored tank with 1 to 400 mega damage, with breathe fire, cast spells, all this, and supernatural strength, and all this stuff.
But not robot strength.
Yeah, or you could be, on page 97, the Vagabond OCC, who is just an unhoused person with their only special ability literally called Eyeball a Fella. And like, which it starts at 56% plus 3% per level of experience. And like, that's all they got.
You see that gold feller over there all glittery? I do believe that there's Glitter Boy. He's dangerous.
Versus the cyborg and the dragon and the guy with more drugs than blood in his bloodstream, and they're fighting crime. Yeah.
I'm going to steal an anecdote from Peter Hentges, a gamer and fine human being who talked about completely random rolling characters in, I think it was Stormbringer. And apparently this was a system that produced huge swings of, you could be a powerful sorcerer or warrior, or you could get the character that Pete rolled up for his one shot, which was he completely randomly rolled up a character who was missing an arm. And he's like, okay, well, that's going to be, an interesting backstory, and missing both legs. Okay, but look, my perception score is really good, so I'm gonna be the lookout, and missing his tongue. And so he's like, yeah, this character, the one and only thing he contributed to an entire 6-hour game was that he spotted the pirates on the horizon before anyone else did, and pointed with his one arm and said, "Aww." And this is a problem with game balance is impossible, but you must strive for it. You want the characters to feel, and I try to find ways to have, okay, we are going to have Aragorn and Pippin in the same party at the same time doing the same, and have them both feel like they are equally the main character, and it's very hard to do. And I think Rifts kind of is papering over the idea by saying, no, if you're a good role player, Mary is just as important as Aragon, the 600-year-old murder machine / correct heir to the throne / raiser of undead army. No, Pippin sings for that dude, and that's very moving. And
well, Rifts just says, well, that's you just haven't made the system your bitch. It's a skill issue.
Is that the quote from the designer's note to Games Master? At some point, I'm not going to do a Kevin's accent, because I haven't seen him in years. At some point, someone somewhere in game design land must have decreed all characters must be equal, and a bunch of games companies jumped on the bandwagon to even out the power level of every character. How tragic. That's like expecting every opponent in a video game to offer the same level of difficulty. Talk about boring. Well, yeah, if it's a you versus the computer game in which you start off at level 1 and progress up through more difficult. But in Street Fighter, yes, they do need to be balanced. And I would say role-playing games, most role-playing games, if you're talking about balancing a party, that's Street Fighter equivalent. Mm-hmm. Characters need to be balanced. They need to be similar power levels, different powers, but they, and yet somehow Rifts works. Somehow Rifts gets away with it.
Yeah, and I mean, part of it is the source material. I'm thinking about this, the classic superhero who would win question, and it's like, is Hawkeye really on the same level as Thor? Is he? I don't think he is. But if, because of the potentials of the form, if they needed a reason that, Hawkeye and Thor are going to have a fair fight where Thor doesn't simply clap his hands and vacate all the air in Hawkeye's lungs or some physically plausible crap. They would find a reason. They would be like, oh, well, he's got it. Somehow he's got this arrow that Thor is super vulnerable to, or something, or Mjolnir.
Yeah, it's up to the writer. That's who wins. Yeah,
Mjolnir refuses to strike him, so poor Thor is reduced to just using his bare hands.
One point I want to make is that, you can have a lot of fun with a bad or a mediocre role-playing system because, if you're with your friends, you're used to each other and what everyone responds to. It's very, I literally have run bad systems on RPPR just, for April Fool's episodes or just for I ran riffs and we had a blast with it and part of it was dragging Caleb and making him suffer. But it was also just because it's not to say it's a good game per se. It's just that's why when you review the game, playing it isn't necessarily, if you could review a game without playing it, because the value of play is based on the people you're with, not the book, more than anything else, not the rules. And Rifts, I think, is because it was cheaper, because it had evocative art, because there was this buffet of options, everyone could grab something that spoke to the players. And the thing is, the GM, despite all the setting material, it's still a blank slate, right? It's most of the Earth is described as this post-apocalyptic wasteland where anything can be anywhere and anything can happen. So the GM can literally make it a Wild West weird town of the week as you wander around fighting wrongs. It's like the Incredible Hulk.
Or you don't want to go up into the hills there, son. There's dragon apes.
Right. It's the A-Team. It's the Hulk. It's, you're righting wrongs and wandering around and doing cool stuff. And that's it. And you fighting the Coalition, who are 100% the bad guys. Man, you're talking about 40K inspirations or equivalents. The Coalition is definitely the Coalition is very much Inquisition coded. We're here to kill everybody, genocidal fascists. So, but that's why it appealed to people, because it was great art. It was cheap. How many gamers just want to learn one system and never want to bother again? They just want more stuff to do with.
Too many.
Yeah. And Rifts appeals to them because they could just grab, we got Atlantis this week and now we got Rifts Sussex County. Cool. Well, we'll just throw them in Sussex County fighting goat farmers.
Rifts Mexico. What's in Mexico? Oh, it's vampires. Mexico is just vampires.
And circuses.
Yeah.
Traveling circuses, because they have the same rules for building organization. Yeah, no, the Rifts Mexico Vampire Kingdoms has vampires and rules for building traveling circuses.
I have to respect that. I have to embrace that degree of wild disconnection. See, there's that woo thing. As I was reading through this, I'm like, okay, let's look at these psychic powers. Boring, boring, boring. Ectoplasm, I can project a 10-foot long, lightly glowing tentacle with a foot at the end. Yeah, okay, you got me now. I'm gonna be tentacle foot, dude.
One of my favorite things is actually the vampires in Rifts, because the way they describe vampires is that they're immune to mega damage weapons, but they're incredibly vulnerable to silver, sunlight, and moving water, which includes squirt guns and fire trucks, a water cannon. So you could do a campaign where you're killing vampires with water balloons because it's moving water and that's all you need. And you can, Home Alone a bunch of vampires.
Who's the glitter boy now?
Yeah, exactly. Glitter boy can't do anything, but the guy with the hobo with the bucket.
Or you'll end up like me, another hobo with a bucket.
Another vagabond.
See? Yeah, exactly. He eyeballed that fella and figured out he was a vampire. Yeah, there we go. Yeah.
Caleb was afraid you would convert me.
Oh, no. Yeah, no. The thing is, if you want to do Rifts, don't use the actual Rift system. Like, I ran a campaign for RPPR last year using the Savage World system, and it was perfectly fine. And as the longer I ran the campaign, the less I relied on the Rift setting material and just made up stuff. There's a shopping mall where there's an intelligent missile that controls it, and you have to talk the missile down from blowing up. The players love that.
Did you
missile.
ever see, what was the movie with Dark Star?
Dark Star.
Oh, yeah.
John Carpenter's but it is my purpose. My purpose is to detonate. Why are you denying me my existential... Look, just not right now, okay? Just don't blow up the sun. Don't blow up this sun right now.
Yeah. It was inspired by that, but also by the meme of the missile knows where it is by knowing where it isn't. But yeah, I have mixed memories of it, but it's important to look at because it's out there and it's a huge number of gamers. That's all they need, and that's all they'll ever. Just more stuff.
If you listeners think Rifts isn't real, it is. Rifts is real. It's out there. It's in the world. You could run across a Rifter tomorrow.
It's true. Also, it's one of the few RPGs with a video game.
Yeah, and there's a double-page advert for it, which is... I've never seen that in any role-playing supplement, and the fact that it's a game for the Nokia N-Gage, a handheld console so badly regarded that it is literally the punchline to jokes. Nobody loves the N-Gage. If you don't know the N-Gage, it was literally a Nokia phone from the mid-90s in... Mid-90s? I think
early 2000s.
No, early 2000s, mid-2000s.
Yeah.
In a kind of Game Boy Color form factor, only really ugly. But it was the same guts as a standard Nokia. They didn't even put any new graphics chips or anything in there. It's just this with this hideous form factor that meant you had to hold it on edge to use it as a phone, and you had to take the battery out to put the game's cartridges in. It was appalling. It did have some decent games, and apparently the Rifts video game, I've seen footage of it, we will link to it in the show notes. Apparently, for the standards of the time, was pretty good. It's only 5%.
Yeah, people have emulated it. Yeah, so you can play it. And there was a trading card game for it. The movie was the Rifts was optioned by Michael Bay or Bruckheimer. It was optioned by a major Hollywood studio.
I think it was Bruckheimer.
Yeah.
Again, we will check in the show notes.
Yeah. And you can buy the script as an official Rift supplement. I think we read a couple pages as a joke at RPPR once, and it's not a great script.
I'm just rolling through the manuscript looking for that N-Gage ad. And because it's 380 pages, I'm only on 170. So it's taken a while.
Yeah, there's a lot to get through.
I'm feeling that buffet bloat.
Kevin plugs the game in the text as well, which I have a page. No, I didn't even write down the page reference for that either.
Whoops.
It's extraordinary.
Yeah, the Rifts Ultimate Edition was published in 2005. The original edition of Rifts was 1990, and they just reprint it. They just keep reprinting it. Like, that's another reason why Palladium is successful, is because they keep their stuff in print. Like, you can buy stuff. You could probably buy Mutants in Orbit.
You can.
In print.
It's still in print. I get no money from it, but it's still in print.
The rules are there's lots of random tables for character creation.
So
like
many
humans
random
have
tables. A lot of stuff is just expressed as random tables. 8 pages of insanity rules. It's so much an artifact of its time. It really feels like an 80s role-playing game that's just somehow still going, like the oldest rocker in town. And you're going, how is that guy still standing? I said, no, he's headbanging as hard as anyone in the club. He's still there.
If it works for you, it works. I mean, you can't argue it. The most difficult argument to win is trying to convince someone they're not having fun when they are. It's like if you like rifts, you like rifts, but
it's so easy to put together a game, a concept for a campaign. You just set it anywhere and just say wacky things are happening. And do you want to be a vagabond or a dragon or a demigod or a robot or a superhero from another universe? Or
I mean, honestly, what I would do is just put to if someone paid me $1,000 to run rifts, what I would do would be just the really most standard, ordinary kind of setup, and then I'm like, everything that's weird is there's gonna be nothing weird in this game but what you bring in: juicer, dragon, mind melter, and vagabond.
It's an extraordinary artifact, and I'm not going to yuck on anyone's yum. It's, if you love rifts, you love rifts, and I'm really glad that you're out there role playing with it. I will say the organisation of the Rifts Ultimate Edition. I couldn't find my original Rifts rulebook. It's in here somewhere, I'm sure. I don't think I've got rid of it. But the organisation of the book is extraordinary. You finally get to what is essentially what is a role-playing game and how do you role-play on page 274. By which point you've been through 40 pages of really dense world background right at the start. And then...
So you're invested.
Almost half of the book carries character classes and all the spells and the skills and the rest of it. The character generation stuff is extraordinary because, step 1 of character generation is 8 pages. Step 2
Did you
is
guys try to make characters?
I made quite enough in the early 90s. Thank you. No, not.
Oh, I made too many over my life.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Did you make one, Greg?
I did. I started, and the first character I rolled up, I got 3 6s in my stats. I'm like, this is unplayable. Ooh. Somebody who is both dumb, really dumb, really feeble, and really homely, and his highest other score is like a 13. I'm like, no, I'm not.
No, you can still be a brain surgeon. It just gives you a penalty to your skills. You're
not
fine.
doing. Nope. I rolled again. Rolled again. Made a mind melter and was wondering. I'm like, okay, so wait. It says under my OCC description that I get. It's like, and now pick 3 from each of these categories. And I'm like, wait, does that mean I add just 3? From any category? Because it sounds like I add 12 psychic powers.
You do get a lot as a mind melter.
So I should have been adding 12 psychic powers instead of just 3. That's ridiculous, man.
You get
that's rifts.
Yeah, you get a ton. Whatever you are,
that's rifts, baby.
Magic users and psychics get tons of like their utility characters, and the robot fighter types get big damage numbers. And that's generally how it goes. These characters are feeble compared to the ones in some of the later source books, where you literally can be a demigod or just true Atlantean vampires.
There is definite power creep within the Rifts universe.
I mean, was it power creep or just power gallop? Because he's like, if you can't play an underpowered character, who can keep up plot wise with these guys, that's just a skill issue. I mean,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, you got to make it your bitch. Yeah,
I don't want to make Rifts my bitch. And I'm just I'm a feeling romantic, as you can tell from my vampire work.
You're not. It's a thinking man's game, Greg. It may not be ready for it. Yeah. The real secret, though, is you need to take, if your character class has the access to the boxing skill, you need to take that at all costs, because boxing gives you an extra attack for each melee round. So that's very, you got to be and mind melters can take boxing, so you need to be a boxing mind melter.
My powers were unlocked after my 4th traumatic concussion.
After I got my golden gloves, my powers really unlocked.
One day, Buddha punched me in the head in the ring, and I became enlightened.
Yeah, a couple of other things. It's a level-based system. There's no multi-classing, though, and it's all based on their own wonky experience. table where you gain experience for using skills and come up with good ideas. So basically, again, this is modifying the system. It's you just house rule it and do everyone levels up or whatever. The alignment system's also a piece of work too, because everyone has to be good, selfish, or evil. Those are the only. And there's 9 alignments. Everyone has to fit under that, and it's very Hollywood movie coded, because you can either be truly good, you could be a Han Solo good, or you can be very cowardly evil, psychotically evil, or honorable and evil. Yeah,
you can be the guy who says, in another world we would have been friends. No, I will always defend those to whom I am loyal. I will never break my word. Now have the slaves torture the prisoners. It's sure. Why would
they've been unchanged since the beginning? They have not touched the alignment system, as far as I can tell.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things I found really interesting was what's not in there. There is no adventures. There's not even a sniff of an adventure. There's surprisingly few of what we would think of as adventure hooks. There's lots of gear. There's lots of cool gear. But, standard hooks, there's nothing. There is a section called Tapping the Infinite, The Right Perspectives for Building Adventures, which is on page 371 of 382. And it's kind of, getting started is simple. First, use this book as your starting point. Your character, blah, blah, blah. Roll up a character. Skills, powers, and equipment. How much do you read? Use common sense and think about what you play. These are the section headers. Are you making the best points? Which Rifts books do you need? And then there's 5 pages of the other Rifts books.
Gotta add that up, so.
How you write an adventure. That's all there is in the book about writing adventures by the standards of a modern game, by which I mean anything written after 1990. This is extraordinary. The other thing is that at the time he was writing this, Kevin had been hanging out with Eric Wujcik since the early 80s, where they set up, I think it was the Detroit Games Club or Detroit Games Center together. Wujcik designed Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and other strangeness, but at the time this came out in 1990, Eric had spent the last couple of years working on Amber, the first diceless role-playing game, but not only that, the first role-playing game that is explicitly based on person-to-person non-physical combat, because it's based on Roger Zelazny's Amber. It's about the tussles and interrelationships between a bunch of siblings who hate each other. And it's also about shifting between universes. And none of that. And Kevin and Eric were tight. They really were. I knew Eric really well. He was, I think I may have talked about this at some point. I think he would like to have been my mentor. Actually, he screwed up my career for a number of years, which that's a whole other episode of a podcast. Eric is dead now, died 2006. So I can talk about him. None of this stuff rubbed off on Kevin. You've got Amber, which did change the industry. The first diceless role-playing game, a commercial success, which Eric then utterly failed to follow up on. He published one supplement for it because he was both a perfectionist and a control freak. Again, that's a whole other thing. And meanwhile, Kevin is just churning out Rift supplements and, creating this thing which is still a pillar. It's not the pillar of the industry that it was, but it's still out there and it's still selling in decent numbers, and that people have an enormous fondness for it because I think it delivered in the early 90s the same jolt that people were getting from AD&D in the early 80s. This very complicated system that you could, once you have mastered it, you can do so much within its confines, and you can have so much fun because there are so many elements that you can juggle and toss around and min-max and create these wonderful, wonderful, potent characters and blast the crap out of each other.
And at the end of the day, isn't that what it's all about?
Pretty much. Yeah. I think to a large extent it is a shame. It feels very much like a video game. You've got these kind of massive characters. I think it would make a brilliant video game, almost better than a role-playing game. And yet it's never made that leap, apart from this N-Gage title, which wasn't really playing to its strengths, not least because the N-Gage was a fairly feeble system in terms of its capacities. It's kind of 2.5D isometric stuff, and the effects of the graphics are really pretty poor.
If you gave this to the guys who made Into the Breach and FTL, it would be amazing.
Yeah, the raw ingredients are there. I mean, I know like there's literally like an MMO style raid in Rift's Worldbook for Africa where you fight the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, and they each have like tens of thousands of MDC. So you're supposed to fight them with a basic army of characters, and it's very ridiculous. But
who wouldn't want to?
Yeah, exactly. You get to kill death. There's no contradiction there. It really appeals to a certain demographic, and Kevin, man, he figured out a formula that's been working all these years.
Yeah, nobody drinks Coca-Cola because it's good for them.
Yeah, but yeah, I like I said, it's part of my foundation as a gamer. What hooked me on role playing games, and the fact that it's still around and they're still cranking out books and product is kind of a minor miracle for good or bad. Astounding to see that, you know, so there are people just like, I just want more stuff. Bring back the buffet. I want to cram my mouth with this.
Yeah.
And now let us go to the dessert chamber.
More than 80 supplements for it. It's a thing.
I want my mega damage chocolate cake.
I want my MDC ribs. I want my MDC ribs.
Any final thoughts? Or I think that kind of summarizes it. So.
No, there's some things cannot be intellectually summarized. Yeah. They can only be regarded with awe and trembling.
And so our next episode is going to be quite the tonal whiplash as we look to an adventure, Unknown Armies Jailbreak. And I think, in terms of game design philosophy and style and like impact on the industry, I think, it'll be a very fascinating contrast, if nothing else.
It has not been played by millions.
Yeah, well,
but quite a few.
Yeah, quite a few. I actually played it earlier this year or last year. Yeah.
What's the date of Jailbreak, Greg?
Oh, I don't know, like 98, 2001. I'd have to look. It's early, but yeah, I stand by it. Anyway, see you then, everybody.
All right, thank you all for listening. Thank you all for supporting the Kickstarter, and we'll talk to you later. Bye.
Bye.